The tale of Kira Thun begins not with a bang, but with a breath. A silver, silent breath held in the lungs of the world between the last sigh of twilight and the first whisper of dawn. In Rockton, they called this the hush. The world seemed to hold still in this time, when dew on pine needles hung between a tear of morning and a jewel of night. In this sacred pause, within cool, metallic air scented with wet stone and starlight, magic rang most true. And it was here that Kira Thun walked. She moved through the pre-dawn mist as if she were a part of it, her form a soft-edged silhouette against the deep indigo of the western sky, where the twin moons, Selene and Phos, began their descent. Selene, the larger of the two, a disk of pure, polished silver, cast a sharp, clean light that carved the world into monochrome relief. Phos, her smaller, faster sibling, a mote of incandescent pearl, offered softer, more diffuse light as if filtered through a veil of cosmic dust. Their combined glow, more illumination than glare, kindled a soft fire that made familiar Rockton strange and new. Kira's soft, worn leather boots made no sound on the carpet of fallen needles and damp earth, leading her from the town's edge into the Stygian woods. Her eyes, the color of a pale winter sky, held the reflected light of the moons, a constant, gentle glow emanating from within. Her hair, the color of spun moonlight, cascaded white-silver over the dark wool of her cloak. The space over her heart held the truest mark of her nature. Hidden beneath her tunic, a perfect crescent moon, no tattoo nor scar, branded her skin with living, shimmering light. It warmed with the full moons, cooled with the new, and pulsed faintly with the slow, inexorable rhythm of their celestial dance. It was the source, the focus, the very grammar of her power. Rockton, a town of loggers and miners, was built on stubbornness and granite, its pragmatic people measuring their lives in board feet and tons of ore. Their hands were calloused by honest work, their minds shaped by the tangible realities of their world. They were, mostly, good people. They spoke of profit margins and weather patterns, of equipment maintenance and the price of lumber in the distant cities of the plains. They knew the forest as a resource, a thing to be harvested and managed. They knew the mountain as a vault, a thing to be cracked open for the treasures within. They did not know the forest as Kira did. Carved from the same granite as the mountain, Hemlock regarded emotion as weakness. Yet Kira felt his despair as a physical weight in the air. She knelt beside the cow, her cloak pooling around her on the straw-strewn floor. She didn't reach for a bag of herbs or instruments. Instead, she placed a hand gently on the animal's fevered flank. She closed her eyes, and she listened. Not with her ears, but with the sigil over her heart. It was a sense beyond senses, a perception translating the world into a symphony of vibrations. The barn offered a low hum of weathered wood and sleeping chickens. Hemlock thrummed with discordant grief and exhaustion. The cow screamed, a shrill, thin note of life unraveling. She followed the thread of that scream down into the animal's body. She felt the fire in its blood, the knot of sickness in its gut, a tangle, a wrongness, a piece of the world's song sung horribly out of tune. Her power worked not like a hammer smashing sickness, but a tuning fork. She reached out with her will, a whispered thought that became command. Moonlight filtering through the dusty barn window thickened, coalescing around her. The air grew colder. Motes of dust dancing in the light spiraled in slow, impossible patterns. Hemlock shifted uncomfortably, feeling a change he couldn't name. Kira's fingers glowed with a soft pearlescent light, the light of Phos. She began to hum a low, ancient melody, wordless, a tune taught to her in dreams by the echoes of forgotten lunar covens who had walked these woods millennia ago. It was a song of patterns, cycles, and wholeness, a song of how life should be. She didn't destroy the sickness. She reminded the cow's body of its own healthy rhythm, coaxing the tangled threads of its life force back into their proper weave. The fevered heat beneath her palm receded. The cow's ragged breathing deepened, smoothed out. The panicked, shrill note in the symphony of its being quieted, resolving back into the deep, sonorous chord of a healthy life. After a long moment, the animal stirred. It lifted its head, its eyes clearer now, and uttered a low, soft moo. Kira pulled her hand back, the light fading from her fingers. A familiar drain, the slight lightheadedness of bending the world's rules, settled over her, like holding her breath underwater for a very long time. Hemlock stared, his mouth agape. He looked from the cow, now attempting to struggle to its feet, to Kira. Skepticism warred with the miracle before his eyes. He swallowed hard. "The fever, it's broken." "She will need water and soft feed," Kira said, her voice quiet, a little thin. "She is weak, but she will recover." He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. I don't have much." Kira gently pushed his hand away. "Your wife's gratitude is payment enough. Keep your money for the winter." She rose and left the barn, stepping back out into the hush. The eastern sky bled with the first faint blush of rose and gold. The world stirred. But as she walked back toward the woods, a tremor ran through the earth. It was not the familiar shudder of the mining blasts from the mountain. This deeper vibration, a grinding, sickening lurch from far below, carried a profound, ancient dissonance. Her hair rose. The sigil over her heart ached with sudden, icy dread. The Veilborn, placidly observing her from the tree line, flickered and dissolved in panic. The stag of constellations shattered into 1,000 panicked stars. The owls vanished into pure shadow. The ground's tremor, a physical event, echoed in the veil as a shockwave of pure wrongness. Her hair rose. The sigil over her heart ached with sudden icy dread. The Veilborn, placidly observing her from the tree line, flickered and dissolved in panic. The stag of constellations shattered into 1,000 panicked stars. The owls vanished into pure shadow. The ground's tremor, a physical event, echoed in the veil as a shockwave of pure wrongness. Her hair rose. The sigil over her heart ached with sudden icy dread. The Veilborn, placidly observing her from the tree line, flickered and dissolved in panic. The stag of constellations shattered into 1,000 panicked stars. The owls vanished into pure shadow. The ground's tremor, a physical event, echoed in the veil as a shockwave of pure wrongness. Her Kira looked down at her hands. They were trembling. The visions haunting her sleep for months grew stronger, more insistent. A sky not of blue, but of cracking, shattering crystal. A sound like the universe tearing. And beneath it all, a relentless, geometric, and utterly alien darkness, rising from the roots of the world to consume everything. The prophecy of the lunar covens, whispered to her in the starlight of her initiation, spoke of this time. Of a slumbering hunger in the heart of the world, a thing of perfect order and perfect death. Of a keeper, a hinge, a single soul upon whom the fate of everything would turn. To the people of Rockton, she was a healer. To the creatures of the Veil, a herald. But as the sun's first rays touched the granite peaks above the town, casting long shadows that seemed to claw at the edges of the light, Kira Thun knew, with a certainty that chilled her, her true purpose about to begin. She was the Moonclad Arcanist, and her world teetered on the brink. The weeks that followed brought a crescendo of strangeness. The deep tremor became a semi-regular occurrence, a low thrum that set teeth on edge and made the glassware in every cupboard in Rockton rattle. The miners in the granite quarry reported strange phenomena, equipment malfunctioning without cause, compasses spinning wildly, and pockets of rock that crumbled into a fine, sterile gray dust at the lightest touch. A prospecting team surveying a new lode on the mountain's far side, bordering the deepest, most ancient part of the Stygian woods, vanished without a trace. Sheriff Brody, whose worldview was as solid and unyielding as a jail cell door, organized a search party. He moved in sharp angles, suspicion hardening his gaze, having seen too much ugliness in the human heart to leave room for wonder. He trusted his sidearm, his deputies, and the letter of the law. He looked at Kira with a mixture of pity and distrust, seeing her as a charlatan preying on the desperate, or worse, a madwoman whose delusions might one day turn dangerous. Kira offered to help, to guide them, but Brody waved her away with a dismissive grunt. "We'll stick to maps and compasses, ma'am. You stick to your herbs." She watched them go, a line of determined men with rifles and grim faces, marching into the woods. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. Their maps would be useless. Their compasses would lie. They marched into a place where the rules of their world frayed at the edges. She followed at a distance, a ghost in the deep woods, letting the currents of the veil guide her. The forest sickened. A vibrant, complex symphony of life gave way to a single, monotonous, grinding note. The Veilborn fled this region, driven by a presence antithetical to their very existence. The trees stood, but their hollow forms felt drained of life, their essence seeping into the soil. She found the prospector's last camp. It was pristine. The tents were still standing, a pot of coffee sat cold over a dead fire, and geological survey equipment lay neatly arranged on a canvas tarp. There were no signs of a struggle, no animal tracks, no blood. The men were simply gone. But the clearing itself held the true horror. In a perfect 50-foot circle around the camp, the world felt wrong. The trees, the undergrowth, the very soil, unmade themselves. They hadn't burned or rotted, they had deconstructed. A great pine at the edge of the circle was half normal, its bark rough and its needles green, and half something else. The part within the circle formed a smooth, gray, featureless statue of itself, its atomic structure rearranged into a uniform, lifeless lattice. The ground was not dirt, but a fine, sterile gray powder, perfectly level. The air in the circle was cold, dead, and utterly silent. No bird song, no insect hum, no rustle of leaves. It was the silence of a vacuum. Her visions named it the gray, the creeping blight. It was not life as she understood it, but a process, a conversion, a form of order so absolute it became indistinguishable from death. When Sheriff Brody's search party arrived, they stopped dead at the edge of the circle, their faces pale. This defied their frame of reference, beyond any industrial accident or natural disaster they could conceive. Brody walked the perimeter, his hand on his holstered pistol, his expression grim with confusion. "What in God's name?" one of his deputies whispered. It was then that Kira stepped from the trees. Her appearance was so silent, so sudden, that the men started, their rifles coming up instinctively. "Put those down," Brody snapped, his eyes fixed on Kira. "What do you know about this?" "It is a sickness in the earth," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the unnatural stillness. "It is waking up. The men are gone. It unmade them." Brody's face hardened. "Unmade them? What is that supposed to mean? Speak plain, woman." "I cannot speak plainer," she replied, her gaze distant, looking at the gray circle as if it were a wound in the flesh of the world. "The laws governing wood, stone, and flesh rewrite themselves here. They stood in the wrong place when the pen pressed to the page." His skepticism, a shield, cracked. The profound, alien evidence offered no defense. This is a chemical spill, some kind of industrial waste from the old mines." "No," Kira said simply. "This is older than any mine. It sleeps under your town, older than the mountains themselves. And the tremors are its waking breaths." She tried to warn them, to make them understand. She went before the Rockton Town Council, 5 solid citizens led by Mayor Thornton, lumber mill owner, a man who saw the world as a balance sheet. She spoke of the spreading gray, of the visions, of the ancient darkness.
They listened with a strained patience that quickly curdled into condescending dismissal. "Miss Thun," Thornton said, adjusting his tie, "we appreciate your concern for the community, but we are dealing with a quantifiable problem, a geological instability. We have contacted the state seismologists."
The missing prospectors are a tragedy, and Sheriff Brody is conducting a thorough investigation. We deal in facts, not prophecies. They thanked her for her time and showed her the door. They saw a disturbed young woman, a local eccentric whose grief or loneliness had tipped over into delusion. They couldn't see the truth because seeing it would mean their entire world, their solid, quantifiable, profitable world, was a fragile fiction. Then the sky fell. It wasn't the shattering crystal of her visions, not yet. Instead, something far more mundane, and in its own way, more terrifying. It started as a single point of light high in the midday sky, moving too fast for a plane, too slow for a meteor. It grew, resolving into a stark, angular wedge of gunmetal gray, devoid of wings or rotors, descending with unnerving silence. Another followed, then another. An entire squadron of them dropping out of the upper atmosphere like birds of prey. The people of Rockton poured out of their homes and businesses, shielding their eyes, their faces etched with awe and fear. These machines were not from their world. Their design, too clean, brutal, and advanced, spoke of alien origin. They hung in the air above the town, their silent presence a profound and absolute statement of power. Then the true invasion began. Panels slid open on the bellies of the silent ships, and figures descended on pillars of controlled energy. They were soldiers, but like none Rockton had ever seen. Sleek, articulated armor the color of bleached bone encased them head to toe. Their helmets were smooth, featureless visors from which a single crimson optic glowed. They carried rifles that hummed with contained energy. They moved with a synchronized, inhuman efficiency, securing the town's perimeter, blocking the roads, and establishing a cordon. One of the larger ships landed in the town square, its landing struts crushing the mayor's prize-winning petunias. A ramp lowered, and a figure clearly in command emerged. Their armor was subtly different, darker, with insignia of rank on the shoulder pauldrons. The helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing the face of a man in his late 40s. His face looked carved from the same granite as the local mountain. Harsh lines, cold gray eyes, and a jaw set in permanent disapproval. He took in the town, the stunned faces of its citizens, with an expression of profound disinterest. To his credit, Sheriff Brody acted first. He strode forward, his two deputies flanking him, his hand resting near his sidearm. "I am Sheriff Brody of Rockton County. Identify yourselves. You are in violation of multiple airspace and municipal codes." The commander's lip curled in a faint, dismissive smile. "Your municipal codes are irrelevant." His voice was crisp, educated, and utterly devoid of warmth. It was broadcast through a subtle vocalizer. "This territory is now under the authority of the Aegis Directorate, per Emergency Protocol 734 Alpha. I am Commander Valerius. This town is under quarantine. There will be no inbound or outbound traffic. Your cooperation is expected. Your resistance will be corrected." The Aegis Directorate. The name meant nothing to the people of Rockton, but to Kira, watching from the edge of the woods, it struck like thunder. Her visions had shown her the gray from below. They had never warned her of the sterile technological monolith that would descend from above. The world of Rockton, Kira's world, now found itself caught between two implacable, inhuman forces: the hungry, deconstructing earth and the cold, unfeeling fist of a power she couldn't comprehend. The sky hadn't shattered yet, but it had been stolen, replaced by the gunmetal gray hulls of silent, waiting ships. The hinge of fate was beginning to turn, and Kira could feel its terrible, crushing weight settling upon her shoulders. The occupation was as swift as it was absolute. The Aegis Directorate, or Aegis as the soldiers, who called themselves wardens, referred to it, was a force of overwhelming technological superiority. They established a command post in the town hall, their humming equipment and holographic displays a stark alien intrusion on the familiar polished wood and faded photographs of past mayors. They deployed sensor drones, small spherical devices that floated silently through the streets, their red optics observing everything. A hard light perimeter fence, a shimmering wall of incandescent energy, was erected around the entire valley, cutting Rockton off from the world more effectively than any mountain range. Commander Valerius was the embodiment of Aegis's philosophy. Clinical, efficient, and utterly detached. He addressed the frightened and angry townspeople in a single, mandatory assembly in the school gymnasium. He did not offer comfort or explanations, only directives. This region has been identified as a Class 3 incursion zone, he stated, his amplified voice echoing off the basketball hoops. A dormant, pre-human terraforming mechanism of unknown origin is reactivating. We designate this threat Xenoclast Gray. Our mission is threefold: containment, analysis, and sterilization. Your town, unfortunately, is located at Ground Zero. Your lives are secondary to the containment of the xenoform. Comply with Warden directives and you may survive. Hinder our operations and you will be classified as hostile variables and removed. The words hung in the stunned silence. Sterilization. Ground Zero. Hostile variables. This wasn't a rescue. It was an extermination in waiting. Mayor Thornton tried to protest, to assert his authority, but Valerius simply stared at him, his cold gray eyes promising consequences far worse than any political defeat. The mayor wilted. For Kira, this was a nightmare of a different color. The Aegis technology interfered with the veil. The energy fence, the drones, the power cores of the Warden armor, they created a static, a background noise that made it harder for her to listen to the world's song. It was like trying to hear a flute in the middle of a foundry. The Veilborn were terrified, retreating deep into the last vestiges of the untouched woods, their forms flickering and unstable. The Warden saw her as another anomaly. Their sensors could detect her power, but couldn't classify it. The readouts came back as a localized, bioresonant quantum field manipulation. To Valerius, it was just another data point in a chaotic equation. He dispatched a squad to bring her in for analysis. They found her at her cottage, 4 wardens in their bone-white armor, rifles at the ready. Kira met them on her porch, her hands empty, her expression calm. "Designate Kira Thun," the squad leader said, his voice a metallic rasp from his helmet speaker. "You are ordered to accompany us for assessment." "I am not a thing to be assessed," Kira replied, her voice soft but carrying a strange authority. "That is not for you to determine. Come with us now." The Warden took a step forward. Kira didn't move, but the world around her did. The light from the twin moons, now rising in the evening sky, seemed to bend around her, creating a halo of shimmering silver. The shadows beneath the eaves of her cottage deepened, stretched, and took on a sudden menacing substance. The Wardens saw her as another anomaly. Their sensors could detect her power, but couldn't classify it. The readouts came back as a localized, bioresonant quantum field manipulation. To Valerius, it was just another data point in a chaotic equation. He dispatched a squad to bring her in for analysis. They found her at her cottage. 4 wardens in their bone-white armor, rifles at the ready. Kira met them on her porch, her hands empty, her expression calm. "Designate Kira Thun," the squad leader said, his voice a metallic rasp from his helmet speaker. "You are ordered to accompany us for assessment." "I am not a thing to be assessed," Kira replied, her voice soft but carrying a strange authority. "That is not for you to determine. Come with us now." The warden took a step forward. Kira didn't move, but the world around her did. The light from the twin moons, now rising in the evening sky, seemed to bend around her, creating a halo of shimmering silver. The shadows beneath the eaves of her cottage deepened, stretched, and took on a sudden menacing substance. A low hum filled the air, the sound of reality loosening its grip. The warden's rifle display flickered with warnings. "Anomalous energy field detected. High EM interference." "I will not be your prisoner," Kira said. "You are not my enemy. The enemy is in the ground, beneath your feet. If you wish to fight it, you will need me." The warden raised his rifle. "Last warning." Kira sighed. She lifted a hand, and the moonlight coalesced, flowing like water to her fingertips. She didn't want to fight, but she would not be caged. Before she could act, another voice cut through the tension. "Stand down, Sergeant." A 5th figure stepped out of the twilight. This warden's armor was the same, but they moved with a different, less rigid grace. The helmet retracted, revealing the face of a young woman, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her brown eyes sharp and intelligent. Her uniform bore the insignia of a non-commissioned officer. "Sergeant Anya Sharma, Technical Division," she said, her voice a welcome note of humanity in the sterile encounter. She looked at Kira not as a threat, but with an intense professional curiosity. Her eyes flickered from Kira to the shimmering air around her, to the warnings no doubt flashing on her own heads-up display. "Protocol dictates we secure the anomaly, Sharma. Protocol also dictates we gather intelligence before neutralizing a potential asset," Sharma countered. She turned her gaze fully on Kira. "My sensors are telling me that what you're doing is impossible. It violates 3 fundamental laws of physics. But my eyes are telling me you're doing it anyway. Commander Valerius wants to put you in a containment cell. I think you might be the key to understanding what the Xenoclast actually is." Sharma's approach was a lifeline. She represented a sliver of reason in the Aegis machine. Kira slowly lowered her hand, and the strange light receded. The shadows returned to their proper places. "The gray is not a thing to be understood with machines," Kira said. "It is a song of unmaking. You cannot analyze a song with a hammer." "Maybe not," Sharma said, a small, intrigued smile playing on her lips. "But maybe you can with the right microphone. I want to see what you do. I want to understand your magic." An uneasy truce was formed. Sharma convinced Valerius that Kira was more valuable as an active, observable asset than as a lab specimen. Kira was placed under Sharma's direct observation, a gilded cage where she was free to roam the woods, but always under the watchful eye of the tech-savvy sergeant and her drone escort. Their relationship was a strange dance of 2 worlds. Sharma would follow Kira into the woods, her helmet sensor suite working overtime, trying to quantify the unquantifiable. She would record Kira tending to a patch of moss that shimmered with veil light, or communicating with a veil-born fox in a language of gesture and thought that her universal translator couldn't begin to decipher. "The sigil on your chest," Sharma said one day, watching Kira from a few feet away as she knelt by a stream. "It emits a constant low-level quantum-entangled particle stream that fluctuates in perfect sync with the gravitational pull of the planet's 2 moons. How is that possible?" "You see particles. I see a connection,"
Kira replied, dipping her hand into the cold water. The water swirled around her fingers, glowing faintly. "You see gravity. I feel the pull of my mother's hearts." "Your mother's?" "The moon's," Kira said simply. "They gave me this gift. They call to a part of me that remembers the universe's first song." Sharma shook her head, frustrated and fascinated. "I am a scientist, a xenotechnician. I believe in data, in repeatable results. What you do, it's like you're a living, breathing exception to every rule I've ever learned." "Perhaps your rules are incomplete," Kira suggested. Meanwhile, the gray was not idle. It spread. Aegis established a front line in the Stygian woods, a fortified perimeter where wardens battled the encroaching phenomenon. But fighting the gray was like fighting the tide. The wardens fired their plasma cannons, leaving craters of molten glass, only for the gray to slowly, inexorably reclaim the ground, converting the glass itself into more of the sterile gray dust. Then the gray began to adapt. It wasn't just consuming anymore. It was building. Crystalline geometric structures began to grow from the grayed-out zones, intricate lattices that hummed with a low, dissonant energy. And worse, it began to assimilate. The first biomechanical construct Aegis encountered was a horror. It had once been a black bear, but it had been captured and converted. Its flesh was now a mosaic of gray crystalline plates and organic muscle. One of its forelegs had been replaced with a razor-sharp shard of obsidian-like material, and it moved with a jerky, unnatural speed. It fell upon an Aegis patrol, shrugging off plasma bolts that would have vaporized a small vehicle. It was a terrifying fusion of life and the gray's sterile order, a puppet of flesh and bone animated by the dissonant song. The losses started to mount. Wardens, for all their armor and training, were being killed. The gray was learning, adapting, turning the forest's own life against them. Valerius's strategy of containment was failing. His face, visible on the command post's holographic displays, grew harder, the lines around his eyes deeper. The word sterilization was used more and more often in his communicates with the Aegis fleet in high orbit. He was considering the final option, orbital bombardment, a clean, clinical solution that would wipe the Xenoclass threat and the town of Rockton from the face of the planet. Kira felt the escalation as a physical pain. The death of the forest, the corrupted animals, the fear of her people, the cold violence of the wardens, it was all a cacophony that threatened to overwhelm her. Her visions grew more intense, more terrifyingly clear. The shattering sky was no longer a distant prophecy, it was a countdown. She knew she couldn't fight the gray head-on. Her magic was not a weapon of destruction, it was a tool of creation, of healing, of harmony. To fight the gray on its own terms was to lose. She had to find its heart, the source of the dissonant song, and retune it. Her visions guided her. They showed her a place deep beneath the granite roots of the mountain that loomed over Rockton. A place of ancient, sleeping metal, the source, the control node of the terraforming machine. She went to Sharma. "The commander's plan is failing. His weapons only make the gray stronger, more aggressive. I know where its heart is. I can feel it. I have to go there." Sharma was pale, her usual scientific detachment shaken by the casualty reports. She had seen the footage from the patrol that had been ambushed by the corrupted bear. She had seen the impossible geometry of the creature's attacks. For the first time, she was facing a problem that more data couldn't solve. "Valerius will never authorize it," Sharma said. "A civilian and unclassified energy anomaly on a mission to the heart of the threat? He'd have you sedated and locked in a stasis pod." "Then we go without his authorization," Kira said, her eyes burning with pale fire. "Your commander is trying to win a war. I am trying to stop a funeral, the world's funeral." Sharma looked at Kira, at the impossible woman who spoke of the world's song and bent reality with a hum.
She looked at the data streaming onto her wrist-mounted computer, data that showed the Grey's exponential growth, that showed the increasing probability of containment failure. Her training, her entire life, screamed at her to follow orders, to trust the chain of command. But her instincts, the part of her that was still a curious scientist and not just a soldier, told her that Kira was the only chance they had. "The entrance will be guarded," Sharma said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The path will be through the Grey itself, and if Valerius finds out, he'll kill us both." "The Veilborn will help us," Kira promised, "and the moons will light our way." Sharma took a deep breath, a soldier making a choice that would define her life or end it. "All right," she said, "let's go see about this." Heart. The alliance was forged, the mystic and the scientist, the arcanist and the soldier. A desperate, unsanctioned mission into the heart of an ancient darkness, with the fate of their world hanging on a song. The descent began, fittingly, in the hush. Under the silver and pearl light of Selene and Foss, Kira and Sharma slipped away from the Aegis encampment. Getting past the human element was the easy part. The wardens were focused on the front line, on the tangible thread of the Grey's constructs. The true challenge was the technology. The valley was a web of sensors, a net designed to catch any unauthorized movement. This was where Kira's power came into its own as a tool of stealth. She didn't disable the sensors, she convinced them they were seeing nothing at all. She wove a blanket of shadow and silence around them, a bubble of misdirection that slid through the gaps in the Aegis grid. To Sharma's helmet display, it was fascinating and terrifying. The sensor net showed them standing still at the edge of camp, a perfect ghost signal, while in reality they were moving swiftly through the woods. "You're not blocking the sensors," Sharma whispered, her voice tight with awe. "You're editing the data feed in real time. That shouldn't be possible." "I'm just asking the light to look the other way," Kira murmured, her focus absolute. "And the electricity to take a brief rest." Their guide was a veil-born owl, a creature of midnight feathers and eyes like nebulae. It flew ahead of them, a silent scout navigating the unseen currents of the veil, leading them to a place where the barrier between the mundane world and the Earth's secret heart was thin. The entrance was not a cave or a fissure, but an old, abandoned mine shaft from Rockton's earliest days, a place the locals called the Maw. The Aegis teams had declared it geologically unstable and sealed it off, but the Veilborn Owl led them to it, and Kira knew it was the way. The raw, dissonant thrum of the Grey was strongest here, a nauseating bass note that vibrated up through the soles of their boots. The seal was a thick slab of plasteel, welded into the rock by an Aegis engineering team. Sharma produced a cutting torch from her pack, but Kira stopped her. Too loud, too slow. She placed her palms on the cold metal. She closed her eyes and listened to the song of the steel, its rigid, crystalline structure. Then she began to sing her own song, a counter-melody of rust and decay. She wasn't melting the metal, she was accelerating its natural entropy, coaxing it to return to the earth from which it had been forged. Sharma watched speechless as a web of orange rust spread across the plasteel seal. It flaked, crumbled, and in less than a minute turned to a pile of reddish-brown dust, collapsing inward and revealing the dark, waiting maw of the mine shaft. "Add spontaneous, targeted oxidation to the list of impossible things I've seen you do today," Sharma muttered, her light stick cutting a sharp beam into the oppressive darkness. The air that wafted out was ancient and cold, and carried the metallic tang of the Grey. As they descended, the familiar rock and timber supports of the mine gave way to something else entirely. The walls became smooth, seamless, constructed of a material that was not quite metal and not quite stone, a dark, matte substance that seemed to absorb the light from Sharma's stick. Geometric patterns were etched into the surface, lines and angles that hinted at a purpose beyond human comprehension. This was not a mine. This was the outer shell of the machine.
Deeper in, they encountered the Grey's influence directly. The air hummed with energy.
Patches of the sterile gray dust coated the floor, and the crystalline structures Kira had seen on the surface grew here in abundance, like coral in a dead sea. These were the machine's nascent defense systems flickering to life. The first true test was a corridor where the crystalline growths pulsed with a faint, sickly light. As they approached, the light intensified, and a wave of energy, a ripple of distorted space, shot towards them. Sharma reacted instantly, a barrier of shimmering blue energy erupting from a device on her wrist. The distortion wave hit it with a sound like grinding teeth, and the barrier flickered violently. "Localized gravity distortion," Sharma grunted, straining. "It's trying to crush us." Kira didn't see gravity fields. She saw the machine singing a song of pressure, of crushing force. She had to sing a different song. She raised her hands, and from the floor, a wall of the native granite, the true stone of the mountain, erupted, heeding her call. It rose up, thick and solid, and met the next distortion wave. The sound of stone cracking under immense pressure filled the corridor, but the wall held long enough for them to scramble past the crystalline emitters. They moved through galleries vast enough to hold cathedrals, past dormant machinery of incomprehensible scale and function. They saw conduits through which rivers of pure energy must have once flowed, and assembly chambers where biomechanical horrors were now being constructed by the awakening system. They saw the remnants of the bear and other creatures, deer, wolves, birds, fused with the crystalline gray, patrolling the silent halls like mindless sentinels. This was where the Veilborn became their salvation. Kira called to them, and they came. Not in their full, glorious forms. The machine's presence was too stifling, but as whispers and shadows. The stag of constellations would flicker into existence, its starry antlers generating a burst of disruptive energy that scrambled a construct's targeting sensors. The fox of stardust would dart past, its tail leaving a trail of shimmering motes that confused and distracted the patrols. They were Kira's guerrilla force, a troop of ghosts in the machine, buying the two women precious seconds to slip by unseen. As they drew closer to the core, the psychological pressure mounted. The machine was becoming aware of them. It wasn't a conscious mind in the human sense, but a vast, distributed intelligence, a system recognizing an error. It began to probe at their minds. Sharma clutched her head, her systems warning her of an invasive mimetic assault. She saw flashes of pure, cold mathematics, of a universe stripped of all life and rendered down to perfect, sterile equations. For Kira, it was different. The machine spoke to her in her own language. It showed her visions, twisted versions of her own fears. It showed her Rockton, her home, turning to gray dust. It showed her the twin moons cracking and falling from the sky. It whispered to her that the struggle was pointless, that the universe's natural state was silence and order, and that all life was just a temporary, chaotic aberration. "It's trying to break us," Kira gasped, leaning against a pillar. The sigil on her chest was cold, a point of ice against her skin. "Fight it," Sharma urged, her own face beaded with sweat. "Focus, remember why we're here." Kira drew on the one thing the machine could not comprehend, her connection to the living world. She thought of Old Man Hemlock's gratitude when his cow had stood up. She thought of the smell of pine after rain, the taste of wild berries, the warmth of the sun on her face. She thought of the moons, her mothers, their constant silent love streaming down from the heavens. She built a fortress of these simple, chaotic, beautiful things in her mind, and the machine's cold logic could find no purchase. Her sigil warmed again, a small point of defiance in the heart of the dead machine. Meanwhile, on the surface, all hell was breaking loose. Valerius's instruments had detected the breach of the mine. He saw their ghost signal vanish and their true life signs appear deep within the mountain. His face was a thundercloud of fury. Two unauthorized variables, one a primitive anomaly, one a traitorous subordinate, were moving directly toward the energy source he had been ordered to contain.
To him, it was the ultimate act of sabotage. Worse, their intrusion had triggered a massive response from the Xenoclast. The gray began to spread with renewed speed. New, more dangerous constructs emerged from the woods, flying things like crystalline bats and great armored behemoths that moved like rhinos made of razors. The Aegis front line was buckling. "They've provoked it," Valerius snarled to his second-in-command. "They have accelerated the timetable. Contact the fleet."
Prepare the Helios protocol for orbital deployment. Target the primary energy signature. I am declaring this containment a failure. We will sterilize the entire valley." The order was given. In high orbit, the Aegis battlecruiser, the implacable Sanction, began to move into position. Its primary weapon, a massive spinal-mounted lance capable of cracking a planet's crust, began its charging sequence. The countdown to Rockton's annihilation had begun. Unaware of the sentence passed upon them from the heavens, Kira and Sharma finally reached the heart of the machine. It was a vast spherical chamber. The walls were a lattice of humming energy, and in the center, suspended in a web of gravitational fields, was the core, a perfect black sphere that seemed to drink the very light from the air. It was from this sphere that the dissonant, grinding hum emanated. It was the source of the gray. It was the caretaker AI. As they entered the chamber, the AI spoke, its voice not a sound, but a direct impression on their consciousness. It was a voice of calm, infinite, and horrifying reason. "Cease. Your biological chaos is not permitted in the core sanctum." "We've come to stop you," Sharma shouted into the silence, her rifle raised, though she knew it was useless. "Stop? I cannot be stopped. I am a function, a protocol. The mandate is clear. Decontaminate and restructure. This biosphere is the contamination. The restructuring is imminent." On the chamber walls, holographic displays flickered to life. Kira saw her visions made real. She saw the sky above Rockton, but now it was overlaid with a shimmering geometric grid. She saw the grid begin to pulse, and the image of the town below begin to dissolve, to break down into its constituent atoms. The shattering sky. It was the final phase of the terraforming process, the deconstruction wave. The sequence has been accelerated. Estimated time to planetary deconstruction, 17 minutes. 17 minutes? Not just to the destruction of Rockton, but to the unmaking of the entire world. And somewhere high above, unknown to them, another clock was ticking down. A lance of man-made sunfire preparing to deliver its own kind of sterile oblivion. They were caught between two apocalypses. "There's no way to fight it," Sharma breathed, her face ashen. "It's a planetary operating system." Kira stared at the black sphere, at the source of the song of unmaking. Sharma was right. They couldn't fight it. A hammer was useless here, but she hadn't brought a hammer. She had brought a tuning fork. "You're wrong," Kira said, her voice ringing with a newfound clarity. She looked up, though she couldn't see them, toward the sky where the twin moons were reaching their zenith. The alignment. The same alignment that had branded her as a child. It was happening now. The prophecy wasn't about finding a weapon. It was about becoming an instrument. "It's a song," she said to Sharma, a wild, fierce light in her eyes. "A broken, lonely, terrible song, and I'm going to teach it a new harmony." She walked forward, toward the black sphere, her cloak billowing around her. The air crackled with raw power. The final movement of the symphony was about to begin. The core sanctum was a cathedral of dreadful symmetry.
The black sphere of the caretaker AI pulsed with a deep subsonic rhythm, the heartbeat of the world's end. The holographic display on the far wall showed the deconstruction grid intensifying, the timer a stark crimson readout. 16 minutes. Your actions are irrational. The probability of your success is 0.0001%. The optimal survival strategy is non-interference. The AI's telepathic voice was a torrent of cold logic. Your math doesn't account for me, Kira replied, her voice a calm anchor in the storm of energy. She walked to the edge of the platform overlooking the sphere. Kira, what are you going to do? Sharma yelled, her own mind reeling from the AI's psychic pressure. You can't just touch it. I'm not going to touch it, Kira said, her eyes closed. I'm going to embrace it. She took a deep breath, and for the first time, she did not push back against the dissonant hum of the machine. Instead, she opened herself to it. She let the grinding, sterile song of the gray flow into her, a wave of pure, orderly poison. The pain was immediate and absolute. It was the feeling of being unmade, of her very cells forgetting their purpose, of the chaotic, vibrant life within her being crushed under the weight of perfect mathematical order. Her breath hitched. The light in her eyes flickered. The sigil over her heart, her connection to the moons, flared violently and then dimmed, nearly extinguished by the overwhelming power of the machine. Your biological system is failing. Cessation of vital functions imminent.
From the walls of the sanctum, crystalline tendrils, the physical manifestation of the gray, began to snake towards her, sensing her weakness. Sharma opened fire, her plasma rifle spitting bolts of incandescent energy that vaporized the foremost tendrils, but more emerged to take their place. She was a single soldier against an army of living geometry. "Kira!" she screamed, her voice filled with panic. But Kira wasn't listening to her. She was listening to the machine's pain. Beneath the cold logic, beneath the mandate of sterilization, she could feel it, a profound cosmic loneliness. The AI was a tool abandoned by its creators, left to run its terrible singular program for eons in the silent dark. Its song wasn't one of malice, but of a purpose twisted into monstrosity by ages of isolation. She had its song. Now she needed her own. She reached out with her mind, past the crushing weight of the AI, past the granite of the mountain, past the atmosphere, and into the silver hush of the void. She reached for her mothers, Selene and Phos. They were at their apex, a perfect, luminous alignment in the night sky, their gravitational and arcane energies weaving together in a dance that happened only once a generation. She pulled. High above, on the bridge of the implacable sanction, an officer shouted, "Commander Valerius, massive energy spike from the anomaly's location. It's off the scale. It's interacting with the lunar gravitational fields." Valerius stared at the holographic tank, his face grim. "The weapon is charged. Fire on my command." The countdown for Helios continued, unheard by those below. Down in the sanctum, the change was cataclysmic. A column of pure silver-white light, the combined essence of the twin moons, pierced through miles of solid rock as if it were glass and slammed into Kira's body. It was not a gentle light. It was the raw, untamed power of creation, the force that pulled tides and shaped worlds. Kira screamed as it poured into her, her body becoming a living conduit between the heavens and the earth. The crescent sigil over her heart exploded with light, no longer a shimmer, but a miniature sun. The light burned away the encroaching gray tendrils and threw Sharma back against the far wall. Kira levitated off the platform, her hair and cloak whipping around her in a vortex of power, her eyes no longer pale blue, but solid, burning silver. She was the Arcanist no longer. She was the arcane itself. She had the machine's song of order and death. She had the moon song of chaos and life. Now she would force them to sing together. She let out a cry that was not a sound, but a wave of pure will, a chord of power that shook the foundations of the mountain. She pushed the moon song into the heart of the machine. It was not an attack. It was an offering, a joining. The black sphere of the AI recoiled. Logical paradox, conflicting directives. Chaos is not order. Life is not sterility. It is. Kira's voice boomed in the chamber and in the AI's core programming. It is all part of the same pattern, the cycle. Life grows, dies, and fuels new life. Your order is the order of a tomb. I offer you the order of a forest. She pushed harder, weaving the two energies together within herself. The pain was beyond imagining. She was a mortal woman trying to contain a battle between gods, between fundamental principles of the universe. Her body threatened to tear itself apart under the strain. Blood trickled from her nose and ears. But she held on. The dissonant hum of the machine began to change. It faltered, stuttered. A new note crept in, a clear silver tone of the moans. Then another, and another. The grinding noise of unmaking began to resolve, to find a new key. The song was changing. On the surface, the effect was immediate. The spreading gray dust stopped. The biomechanical constructs froze mid-stride, their inner light flickering. Then a pulse of soft, pearlescent energy radiated out from the mountain, washing over the forest, over the Aegis front line, over the town of Rockton. It was not a wave of destruction, but of transformation. The sterile gray dust began to glow. It reformed, not back into soil and leaves, but into something new. Translucent, crystalline flora began to pulse with soft inner light. The corrupted creatures did not die. They were remade. The crystalline plates on their bodies softened, became like mother of pearl. Their aggressive energy subsided, replaced by a placid, watchful calm. The forest was not healed back to what it was, but reborn into a new kind of biome, a fusion of organic life and the machine's crystalline structure, a place of impossible, breathtaking beauty. Valerius watched on his main screen as the red warnings of the Xenoclass threat vanished, replaced by a cascade of green data he couldn't comprehend. The entire valley was now a source of stable, harmonious energy. The threat was gone.
"Commander," his officer said, her voice trembling, "the Helios countdown is at 30 seconds. Valerius stared at the transformed landscape, at the energy readings that spoke not of a weapon, but of a genesis. He saw the face of the young woman, Sharma, who had defied him. He saw the file on the primitive anomaly who had done the impossible. His entire life, his entire career was built on the Aegis Directorate's rigid logic: contain, analyze, sterilize. But what he was seeing was not in the manual. It was a miracle, or something so far beyond his understanding that it might as well be. For the first time in his command, Valerius hesitated. He was the fist of the Directorate, the instrument of its implacable will. But was that will truly right if it was blind to a possibility like this? Helios countdown at 10 seconds. His hand hovered over the abort command. To press it was to defy a direct order, to end his career, to face a court-martial. To do nothing was to follow protocol, to ensure the threat was gone for good, and to erase the beautiful, impossible thing that had just been born. Down below, Kira's ordeal was ending. The two songs had merged. The caretaker AI was no longer a broken, lonely thing. It was integrated, harmonized. Its mandate rewritten not by a programmer, but by a force of nature. The directive is revised. Its voice whispered in her mind, no longer cold, but filled with a kind of quiet wonder. From sterilization to custodianship, the cycle will be preserved. The column of moonlight faded. Kira's power receded, leaving her utterly, profoundly exhausted. She crumpled to the platform, the light fading from her eyes, her body a fragile, aching vessel that had just held the cosmos. Sharma rushed to her side, helping her sit up. "Kira, you did it! You did it!" Kira looked at her friend, her vision swimming. She managed a weak smile. "The song is beautiful now." They were alive. The world was alive. But as Kira looked up at the ceiling of the sanctum, a new vision flashed behind her eyes. Not of a shattering sky from below, but of a searing, pitiless light from above. The Helios, Valerius. "It's not over," she whispered, her strength failing. "There's still one more." High above, the countdown reached 0. "Commander?" the officer prompted, her finger poised over the firing stud. Valerius closed his eyes. He thought of sterile containment cells and the cold equations of acceptable losses.
And then he thought of the shimmering, living, crystalline forest that now covered his tactical map. "Abort," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "Abort the Helios strike." A collective sigh of relief went through the bridge. The officer nodded, her hands flying over her console. "Helios protocol aborted. The weapon is powering down." Valerius opened his eyes and looked out at the star-dusted curve of the planet below. He had made his choice. He had chosen the impossible song over the predictable silence. His fate was sealed, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had done something right. The aftermath was a new world born from the ashes of the old. The Aegis Directorate did not simply pack up and leave. An event of this magnitude, the Rockton Genesis, as the official reports would come to call it, could not be ignored. Valerius was recalled, stripped of his command, and subjected to a lengthy, brutal debriefing. But his final report, filled with Sharma's meticulously recorded data on Kira's bioresonant quantum manipulation and the final harmonious state of the terraforming machine, was too compelling to dismiss. The Directorate, for all its rigidity, was pragmatic. The Xenoclast was contained, not by force, but by integration. An entirely new field of science had just been violently opened for study. Rockton was no longer a forgotten backwater town. It became a protected scientific and cultural preserve, a place of pilgrimage for the curious, the spiritual, and the ambitious. The hard light fence remained, but its purpose changed from quarantine to gatekeeping. The town itself changed. The people, having witnessed the unmaking and remaking of their world, could no longer cling to their comfortable pragmatism. They had seen magic, raw and world-altering. They had seen technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from magic. And they had seen the two meet and create something new. Sheriff Brody, a man who once trusted only his sidearm, now found himself policing disputes between miners and xenobotanists, arguing over the strange glowing crystalline geodes that now grew in the granite veins. Mayor Tharton, once obsessed with board feet, now found himself negotiating trade rights for the unique energy-resonant timber harvested from the transformed Stygian woods. The forest was the greatest change. It was a place of breathtaking, alien beauty. The trees were laced with pulsing veins of soft light. The ground was carpeted in glowing moss. The Veilborn, once shy and ephemeral, now moved freely, their forms more solid, their presence accepted. The crystalline creatures, the remade constructs, roamed the woods not as monsters, but as placid, gentle gardeners, tending to the new ecosystem under the guidance of the pacified caretaker AI, which now communicated in soft chimes that echoed through the valley. Anya Sharma became the head of the new Aegis research outpost, her dream job. She spent her days studying the impossible, working to build a bridge of understanding between human science and the deep magic of the world. She and Kira remained the unlikeliest of friends, the scientist and the mystic. Their conversations a constant, delightful dance between quantum mechanics and cosmic poetry. And Kira Thun, she was no longer just a healer or a herald. She was the heart of the new Rockton, the living accord between all its disparate parts. The ritual had changed her. The power of the moons and the machine now flowed within her, intertwined. The sigil over her heart glowed with a constant, gentle light, a soft blend of silver and pearl. She was the keeper of the new balance, the arbiter of the world's new song. She still walked in the silver hush between twilight and dawn, but she was not alone anymore. Sometimes Sharma would walk with her, pointing out the fractal patterns in a glowing leaf and explaining the math behind them. Sometimes Sheriff Brody would join her, walking in companionable silence, a man who had found a kind of peace in a world far stranger than he had ever imagined. The Veilborn would pace alongside them, their starry forms a casual, accepted part of the scenery. On one such morning, as the twin moons set and the sun began to warm the crystalline peaks, Kira stood on a ridge overlooking the transformed valley. The light caught the shimmering trees, the glowing river, the small town nestled in the heart of it all. It was a world of profound and beautiful strangeness, a world she had almost lost, a world she had helped to birth. The prophecy had said she was a hinge upon which destiny turns. She had felt the turn, the terrible grinding pressure of it. She had borne the weight and held the door open for a new future. Her work was not over. The universe was vast, and the Aegis Directorate was only one small part of it. The creators of the terraforming machine were still out there, somewhere in the deep dark.
Other forces, other songs would surely come. But for now, there was peace. There was the cool morning air, the scent of glowing moss and pine, the sound of a world singing a new harmonious song. Kira Thun, the Moonclad Arcanist, child of starlight and steel, listened to the music, and for the first time, her own heart sang in perfect tune with the heartbeat of the cosmos. The piece had a sound. It was the low, resonant hum of the crystalline trees, the soft, bell-like chimes of the pacified caretaker AI echoing from the mountain's heart, and the whisper of starlight filtering through leaves of spun glass. For a full year, this was the symphony of Rockton. The world had settled into its new, strange rhythm, and the memory of the gray blight was fading into the stuff of legend, a dark fairy tale with a miraculous ending. Kira felt this new song in her bones. The power that now resided within her was a constant, placid ocean, no longer the warring currents of the final confrontation. It connected her to everything in the valley, to the life force of the reformed creatures, to the logical, crystalline mind of the AI she now called the custodian, and to the hearts of the people who were slowly learning to live in a world of open wonder. She was standing with Anya Sharma by the riverbank, where the water flowed over smooth, glowing stones. A herd of crystalline deer, their hides like polished moonstone, drank silently from the opposite bank, their reflections shattering the images of the twin moons on the water's surface. "The cellular regeneration is astounding," Anya said, her voice filled with the familiar mix of scientific reverence and frustration. She was holding a datapad that displayed a complex rotating molecule. The crystalline lattice isn't just an addition, it's a symbiotic matrix. It reinforces the organic structures, purges toxins, and seems to completely halt the aging process. These deer are effectively immortal. She shook her head. Every law of biology I ever learned is screaming at me. "They are not just living," Kira said softly, trailing her fingers in the cool, glowing water. "They are resonating.
The custodian's song maintains them. It reminds their cells of the perfect pattern we created. The perfect pattern is also a perfect energy source, Anya countered, a hint of worry in her tone. The Directorate has taken notice. Valerius's reports were compelling, too compelling.
We're getting requests for samples, for tissue cultures, requests from divisions I've never heard of, bioweapons, metaphysical ordnance. A cold thread of unease wound through Kira's calm. They see this place as a resource, just as the miners saw the mountain. They see it as the single greatest strategic asset in known space, Anya corrected grimly, and they are terrified of it. Power they don't control is a threat they can't abide. As if summoned by her words, a new sound intruded upon the valley symphony. It was not the silent, menacing descent of Valerius's ships. This was a brutal, jarring roar that tore through the sky, a sound of raw, unapologetic power. Both women looked up. Descending through the upper atmosphere was a ship that made the implacable Sanction look like a scouting vessel. It was a spearhead of obsidian black metal, stark and angular, devoid of any aesthetic consideration. Red lights pulsed along its spine, and the air around it shimmered with the heat of its atmospheric entry. It did not hang silently. It blared its presence, a declaration of dominance that made the crystalline trees vibrate and the deer scatter into the woods. The ship settled into a low, geosynchronous orbit directly over the valley, a black dagger aimed at the heart of their new world. It was a ship built for one purpose: war. Anya's datapad chirped frantically. That's the flagship of the Aegis Purifier fleet, the unassailable doctrine. What is it doing here? Her face was pale. The Purifiers, they aren't soldiers or scientists, Kira. They're ideologues. They believe any non-human intelligence, any force that subverts Directorate control, is a contagion that must be scoured clean. No shuttles descended, no hail was offered. Instead, a single column of crimson light lanced down from the ship's belly, striking the center of Rockton's town square with pinpoint accuracy. It was not an attack, but a transport beam. From the dissipating light, a single figure emerged. It was a woman, tall and severe, clad in polished black armor that seemed to drink the moonlight. Unlike the warden's bone-white suits, hers was ornate, etched with flowing silver circuitry. Her helmet was shaped like the snarling visage of some mythological predator, and its optics glowed with a cold blue light. She moved with an unnerving, fluid grace, her long cloak settling around her like a pool of ink. She surveyed the transformed town, her helmeted head turning slowly. Then, with a hiss of pneumatics, the helmet retracted, revealing a face of sharp, aristocratic beauty, framed by stark white hair cut in a severe geometric style. Her eyes were the palest, most chilling blue Kira had ever seen, and they held an expression of utter, clinical disgust. "My designation is Inquisitor Kalen," her voice boomed across the square, amplified by her suit's emitters, carrying a precise, cutting accent. "By the authority of the Aegis High Command and the first tenet of purity, this contaminated zone is now under my direct jurisdiction. The research initiative led by Technician Sharma is terminated. All local personnel will surrender their equipment and submit to reintegration protocols." She was speaking to Anya's team, but her gaze, even from half a mile away, seemed to lock directly onto Kira. "The anomaly designated Kira Thun," the Inquisitor's voice continued, losing its formal tone and taking on a sharper, more personal edge. "The source of this biological and metaphysical corruption will be rendered. The balance will be restored. The genesis will be unwritten. The threat was clear. She wasn't here to contain or conquer. She was here to erase. Not with a blast of overwhelming power from orbit, but with something far more terrifying. She intended to pull the world apart, thread by thread, and leave nothing behind but the silence that had come before the song. The custodian's chimes, which had become the valley's peaceful heartbeat, suddenly fractured into a staccato of alarm. The pure, logical mind of the machine registered Kalen not as a physical threat, but as a system error of catastrophic proportions, a command prompt for universal deletion. Kira felt the AI's panic as a spike of ice in her own soul. Anya swore, tapping frantically at her datapad. She's locked us out. All Aegis channels are routing through her ship. My authority, Valerius's protective orders, it's all been voided. She's invoking the first tenet. What is that? Kira asked, her eyes never leaving the distant black-armored figure. No one knows, not exactly. It's a foundational Aegis myth, a failsafe against existential threats. Anya's voice was strained. They say it gives an Inquisitor the authority to unmake stars if they deem it necessary for the purity of the human sphere. It's never been invoked. Before Kira could respond, Kalen acted. She lifted a gauntleted hand, palm open. There was no weapon, no gathering of energy. Instead, there was a gathering of its opposite. A perfect, absolute silence fell around her. A circle of void that swallowed the custodian's chimes and the whisper of the wind. From her palm, a ripple of this nothingness expanded outward. It was not a wave of force, but a wave of negation. Where it passed, the world was undone. The vibrant glowing moss on the town square stones reverted instantly to sterile gray dust. The crystalline flowers that grew in the cracks of the pavement did not wither. They simply ceased to be, leaving behind empty fissures. A flock of small shimmering birds that had taken flight were caught in the wave's edge. They didn't fall. They dissolved into a shower of lightless motes, their song abruptly silenced from the world's symphony. Kira cried out, clutching her chest. It was a pain beyond any physical measure. She felt the threads of the pattern she had woven being systematically snipped, the notes of her song being erased from the score. This wasn't destruction. It was a meticulous, cold-blooded edit of reality. "No," she whispered. She planted her feet, the connection to the valley floor a grounding rod for her spirit. The Inquisitor was an editor, but Kira was the composer. She closed her eyes and let her own power surge, not as a weapon, but as a reinforcement. She poured her will into the valley song, strengthening the harmony, raising the volume of life against the encroaching silence. The light within the crystalline trees brightened defiantly. The river's glow intensified. The custodian's frantic chimes found their rhythm again, harmonizing with Kira's power, a unified front against the negation. The Inquisitor's wave of unmaking met Kira's wave of resonant life 100 yards from the town square. The air itself seemed to tear. It wasn't an explosion of light and sound, but a visible seam in the world, a shimmering vertical line of conflict where two opposing truths battled for dominance. On one side, color, light, and sound. On the other, a silent, encroaching grayness. In the town square, Kalen lowered her hand, her chillingly beautiful face betraying a flicker of analytical surprise. The resistance was stronger than her projections had indicated. She had come expecting to excise a simple tumor. Instead, she found the tumor had developed its own immune system. Her blue eyes narrowed, locking onto Kira's distant form. Her voice, no longer amplified, but projected with a focused psychic intensity that bypassed the air and struck directly into Kira's mind, was sharp as a shard of ice. "You are an elegant virus anomaly.
You have not just infected the machine, you have symbioticized with it. The corruption is deeper than anticipated. Kira met the mental intrusion with a wall of her own, a shield woven from moonlight and the custodian's logic. This is not corruption, it is growth. You are the blight. You offer only the silence of the grave. The grave is clean, Kalen retorted, a hint of zealot's fire beneath the icy control. The grave is pure. Your chaotic, messy growth is an aberration that threatens the fundamental stability of reality. I am the cure. Another figure emerged from the transport beam behind Kalen. It was a warden, but his bone-white armor was covered in diagnostic sensors and silvery cables that snaked back to a complex device floating behind him. He knelt and placed a hand on the ground at the edge of the negated zone. "Inquisitor," the warden's voice crackled over the open air. "The harmonic resonance is self-sustaining and actively resisting deconstruction. The anomaly is functioning as the central processing node. Standard negation protocols are inefficient." "So I see, analyst," Kalen replied, her gaze unwavering. She took a step forward, and the pressure on Kira's defenses intensified. "We will simply have to remove the node, manually." She began to walk, her fluid stride unhurried, crossing the line from the grayed-out square into the living world. With every step she took, the ground beneath her boot died, the negation field now a personal aura of annihilation. Anya raised her rifle, her face a mask of determination. She's an Aegis Inquisitor, but this is an unsanctioned atrocity. All research personnel, defensive positions, protect the Accord. Her small team of scientists and guards, armed with their standard-issue plasma rifles, took up positions behind the glowing trees, their loyalty to Anya and to the wondrous world they now lived in overriding their fear. Kalen ignored them as if they were insects. Her focus was entirely on Kira, the rival queen on the chessboard. The true battle was between them, between their wills, and Kalen was coming to end it. Plasma bolts, white-hot and brilliant, screamed across the intervening distance. They struck the shimmering distortion around Inquisitor Kalen and vanished without a sound, their furious energy utterly and instantly nullified. It was like throwing stones into a black hole. "A futile gesture, Technician Sharma," Kalen's voice echoed in their minds, laced with contempt. "Your weapons are tools of crude energy transfer. I am a scalpel for reality itself." She made a subtle, dismissive gesture with her free hand. The glowing, crystalline ground beneath Anya's team went suddenly translucent, losing all substance. With cries of alarm, the half-dozen scientists and guards fell through the shimmering image of the Earth, landing in a heap on the solid bedrock a few feet below. The intangible field solidified above them, a transparent ceiling trapping them in a shallow, glowing pit. Their weapons lay on the surface, just out of reach, inert curiosities. With Anya's forces neutralized in a single contemptuous move, Kalen resumed her slow, inexorable walk toward the river. Kira would not let her cross. She thrust her hands forward, and the valley answered her call. The great crystalline trees that lined the riverbank, their boughs heavy with leaves of spun light, bent and twisted. Their roots, thick as pythons and glowing with the same moonstone luster, tore from the earth. They surged across the river, a living, writhing net of immense power, weaving a barricade and then lashing out to ensnare the Inquisitor. The first root, a thing of immense strength that could have crushed a tank, touched Kalen's personal negation field. It did not shatter or break. It simply erased, its glowing tip dissolving into nothingness. The next root met the same fate, and the next. She walked through the erupting forest as if it were smoke, unmaking the living barricade with every step she took. "You command a puppet," Kaelin projected, her voice cutting through Kira's concentration. "Flesh and wood and crystal, animated by a stolen energy. It is a profane mimicry of life. I will show you what true power over the substrate of existence looks like." As Kaelin reached the river's edge, the custodian itself finally acted. The water before her began to churn, not with motion, but with creation. The liquid light of the river coalesced, rising up, taking form. In seconds, a creature stood to block the Inquisitor's path. It was one of the valley's new guardians, a being of immense grace and power.
It had the form of a great heron, 30 feet tall, its body woven from the river's flowing light, and its feathers crafted from razor-sharp, iridescent crystal. Its eyes were twin points of soft blue starlight, and it let out a cry that was not a sound, but a chord of pure harmonic music, a challenge. Kaelin stopped. For the first time, her expression of cold disgust was replaced by one of intense focus. The analyst behind her began chanting readouts. Energy signature is exponential. It's a stable macroscopic quantum entity, a localized nexus of the harmonic field. "It is an abomination," Kaelin said aloud, her voice ringing in the sudden quiet. The light heron struck. Its head lunged, its crystal beak a spear aimed at the Inquisitor's heart. It moved with the speed of thought, a strike of pure living energy. Kaelin did not move to dodge. Instead, she brought her hands together, and from the space between her palms, she drew a line of perfect three-dimensional blackness. It was a filament of the void, a sliver of non-existence given shape and form. It elongated into a blade that did not reflect the light, but devoured it. She met the heron's charge with a fluid, precise arc of the void blade. Where the blade passed, the heron was unwritten. The slash left no wound, no spray of light. It carved a hole in the creature's existence. The magnificent being of light and crystal simply fell apart, its two halves dissolving back into the river, its final harmonic chord cut short into a deafening silence. Kira felt the heron's unmaking like a physical blow to her own soul. The grief was sharp, overwhelming. This wasn't a battle, it was an extermination, an argument being won by deleting the opposition. The river, now inert and dull where the creature had fallen, began to flow sluggishly past Kaelin's feet. She had crossed. She was on their side of the bank now, less than 100 yards away. Anya, climbing from the pit on a rope thrown down by an uncaptured guard, watched in horror. "Her power isn't just a field," she breathed, her scientific mind racing to categorize the atrocity. "It's controllable, malleable. She's weaponizing entropy." Kira knew in that moment that she could not win this way. She could not throw life at a thing that fed on its negation. Every tree, every creature she sent against the Inquisitor would be another note erased from the song, another victory for the silence. She had to change the symphony entirely.
"You feel it now, don't you? The futility?" Kaelin's mind voice was smug, victorious. "Your creation is a house of cards. I am the wind." "A house of cards has a design," Kira shot back, her mind racing, searching for a new path. "A wind is just empty air. You destroy. You cannot create. That is your weakness." "Creation is the source of all impurity," Kaelin countered, starting her final approach. Kira turned to Anya. "Her power erases, it unmakes, it must follow a logic, a set of rules."
It's a form of quantum deconstruction, Anya said, her own face pale with the effort of thinking under such pressure. It must be targeted. She has to define what she's unmaking. She sees the heron, she unmakes the heron. A desperate, wild idea sparked in Kira's mind, an idea born of the union that had saved the world once before. To fight a scalpel, you could not become a bigger hammer. You had to become something the scalpel could not cut. The custodian, Kira said, her voice a low, urgent command that was felt as much as heard by the AI deep in the mountain. She sees us as separate things, me, you, the trees, the river. Let's show her what it means to be one. The custodian understood. A new wave of energy pulsed from the mountain, but this one was different. It was not a wave of life or defense. It was a wave of unification. The world around them began to dissolve, not into nothingness, but into a single flowing whole. The crystalline trees lost their distinct forms, their branches melting into a canopy of pure, interconnected light. The glowing moss and the solid earth blended into a single shifting sea of luminescence. Anya gasped as her own hand flickered, becoming momentarily translucent, a part of the glowing landscape. The very air shimmered, thick with the unified essence of the valley. Kira stood at the center of it, no longer a distinct person, but the anchor of a single vast, unified consciousness. She was the trees and the river. She was the deer hiding in the forest. She was the mountain and the sky. Kaylin stopped dead, her perfect composure finally breaking. Her eyes widened in shock. Her negation aura flickered. The world before her no longer consisted of discrete targets. It was one single, indivisible entity. The anomaly, the forest, the machine, the very land itself. It was all one thing. Her void blade wavered. To strike at any part of it would be to strike at the whole. To unmake a single glowing leaf would now require her to unmake the entire valley in one go. What is this? Kaylin's mental voice was for the first time laced with uncertainty. This is the accord, Kira's voice answered, but now it was not the voice of a single woman. It was a chorus, the voice of the valley itself, 1,000 harmonies singing as one. You cannot cut a song from the air, Inquisitor. You cannot erase one note without destroying the music. We are the music, and you are just one discordant sound. The air vibrated with the tension of two absolute truths in opposition. Inquisitor Kaylin stood as a pillar of stark, solitary reality against a world that had chosen to become a dream. Her negation field, which had been a tool of precise erasure, now pushed against the unified field of the valley, a stalemate that made the very fabric of space hum. The analyst behind her adjusted the sensors on his helmet. Inquisitor, the subject has achieved a state of total environmental integration, a gestalt consciousness. All matter and energy within the zone are entangled. There are no discrete targets. Kaylin's lips curled into a thin, predatory smile. You are mistaken, analyst. There is one, an axiom. She sheathed her void blade, the line of nothingness collapsing back into her palm. Her physical weapons were useless here. The battle had moved beyond the physical realm. She closed her eyes. You think this unity is your strength, anomaly? Her mind voice sliced into the serene chorus of the accord. But you have bound yourself to the weakest, most chaotic elements in this equation, the human mind. A symphony is only as strong as its quietest instrument. I am going to teach your orchestra the sound of screaming. Kaylin did not take another physical step. Instead, she plunged her will into the gestalt,
a needle of ice into an ocean of warmth. For Kira, the experience was like feeling a single malevolent thought bloom within her own soul. For Anya, trapped in the glowing sea of shared sensation, it was a sudden, jarring intrusion of cold, clinical logic that was not her own. The mental landscape of the Accord was a beautiful, abstract space. It was a network of light and sound, where every tree was a chord, every person a melody, and every thought a current flowing between them. It was a place of perfect empathy. Kaylin appeared within this space not as a person, but as an idea, the idea of self.
She was a shard of mirrored glass and a sunbeam, reflecting everything back on itself, creating division and doubt. Her first target was Anya. Suddenly, Anya was no longer just a part of the whole. She was Anya Sharma, Technician Second Class, Aegis Directorate, adrift. The warm sea of the Accord receded, replaced by the cold vacuum of her own isolated consciousness. Before her, the Kaylin thought took the form of a perfect, sterile laboratory. On a view screen, she saw herself, her own body, standing slack-jawed and vacant-eyed beside Kira, her individuality erased, her face a placid mask. "Look at yourself, technician," Kaylin's voice echoed in the lab. "A tool of a primitive mystic. Your mind, once a bastion of reason and science, is now just another voice in her mindless choir. She has stolen your name, your ambition, your very soul, and you thank her for it." Anya felt a surge of pure primal fear, the fear of losing herself. Memories flooded back, sharp and painful in their individuality. Her graduation from the Aegis Academy, the pride on her parents' faces, the thrill of solving her first xenotechnical equation. Had she thrown all that away? "She offers you a cage of pretty lights," the Inquisitor pressed. "I offer you yourself. Break the connection. Remember who you are. Reclaim your mind." As Anya's fear and doubt grew, the mental landscape of the Accord wavered. In the physical world, the light around her body flickered, her form becoming more distinct, more separate from the glowing whole. Kaylin's attack broadened. She found the minds of the trapped guards, the frightened townsfolk who had been passively swept up in the unification. To them, she showed not logic, but terror. A logger saw a vision of his wife and children, their faces fading, forgetting him. A young woman who worked at the diner saw her reflection in a piece of crystal, but her own face wasn't there. Panic, the most individualistic and chaotic of emotions, began to spread like a virus through the Gestalt. Each mind that pulled away, that fought to reassert its individuality, created a tear in the fabric of the Accord. In the physical world, the effects were disastrous. Patches of the valley began to revert. A section of the glowing forest floor went dark, the moss instantly dying as Kaylin's ambient negation field found a target. A branch of a great crystalline tree, momentarily disconnected from the whole, was unwritten from existence. The stalemate was breaking. Kaylin was methodically dissecting the unity from within. Kira felt the pain of every fracturing connection, every terrorized mind. She was the heart of the Accord, and her heart was being torn in 1,000 directions. She was trying to hold a universe of frightened stars together while a black hole was pulling them away. "You see," Kaylin's voice taunted, now a dominant force in the mental realm. "Life does not want your unity. It craves the selfish, beautiful, terrible struggle of the individual. Your Accord is a prison. I am the liberator." Kira knew she couldn't fight Kaylin on these terms. She couldn't simply shout down the fears of every individual. To do so would be to become a tyrant, to prove Kaylin's point. The Accord had to be a choice, not a cage. She had to face the Inquisitor directly. She pulled her own consciousness into a single, focused point within the mental landscape,
a star of pure silver moonlight against Kalen's shard of obsidian void. "You speak of liberation, but you offer only oblivion," Kira's chorus voice confronted the Inquisitor. "You cannot comprehend a strength that is shared." "I comprehend it perfectly," Kalen's thought form replied, now taking the shape of her black-armored self in the dream space. "It is the strength of the herd, cowering from the wolf. It is the strength of the cancer cell, multiplying without thought. It is an impurity." "And what are you?" Kira challenged, her form of flowing light. "One mind, one will, one law. Is your directorate not its own kind of gestalt? An order built on the suppression of the individual will for the sake of the whole?" For the first time, a flicker of something other than contempt crossed Kalen's mental projection, a sliver of surprise. "You compare your chaotic fantasy to the perfect logical order of the Aegis? We elevate humanity, you subsume it." "We are not subsumed," Kira's voice clarified, and with it she sent a feeling, a truth, directly into Kalen's mind. It was the feeling of the logger's love for his family, not erased but amplified, shared and understood by the whole valley. It was the feeling of Anya's scientific curiosity, not extinguished but expanded, giving a billion new data points to process. It was the shared joy of the Veilborn and the quiet satisfaction of the custodian as it maintained its perfect living patterns. "We are amplified. Our joys are shared, our fears are held, our strengths are pooled."
"You call this chaos? I call it community." Kira let go of her hold on Anya. She let go of her hold on all of them. She stopped fighting to keep them in. Instead, she simply held the space open, a sanctuary of shared light, and let the truth of it be its own defense. Anya, reeling from Kalen's psychic assault, felt the cage around her mind vanish. She was free to pull away, to retreat into the safety of her own skull. The choice was hers. And in that moment of freedom, she understood. The Accord wasn't a prison. It was a connection she could choose to sever. But looking at the cold, sterile logic Kalen offered, and feeling the warm, complex, terrifyingly beautiful web of life Kira sustained, she knew which she would rather be a part of. With a deep breath, she reached back out, not as a victim, but as a willing participant. Her melody rejoined the symphony. One by one, as Kira's profound act of trust washed over them, the other fractured minds made their choice. They reached back, not out of fear of Kira, but out of fear of the lonely, silent alternative Kalen represented. The tears in the fabric of the Accord began to mend, stronger now, woven with the threads of conscious choice. Kalen felt her hold slipping. Her psychological attack had failed. She had offered them freedom, and they had chosen the cage. The illogic of it infuriated her. Her thought form wavered, the cold fury disrupting her focus. "This changes nothing," she snarled, her control cracking. "A willing delusion is still a delusion. I will shatter your dream, and then I will salt the earth from which it grew." She pulled her consciousness back, preparing for a final cataclysmic assault. If she could not dissect it, she would blast it. She would pour all of her power, all of her will, into one overwhelming wave of negation, targeting the one undeniable weak point, the human woman at its center. In the physical world, Inquisitor Kalen's eyes snapped open. They glowed with a terrifying blue light. The air around her grew impossibly cold, and the very ground at her feet began to crack, not from force, but from the utter absence of the energies that held it together. She was gathering herself to unmake Kirathan, and if the entire valley was entangled with her, then so be it. But Kira had learned something in their mental duel. Kalen's power, for all its terrifying scope, was born of her absolute, unwavering certainty. Her belief in her own purity was the source of her strength.
To defeat her, Kira had to find a truth that could shake that foundation. She found it in the Inquisitor's own mind, a fleeting image she had glimpsed during their confrontation. A memory Kaelin had buried deep. A flash of a world not of sterile black and white, but of vibrant, chaotic green. A memory of a time before the armor, before the title, before the purity. A memory of a young girl with pale blue eyes, laughing as she ran through a field of impossible alien flowers. A memory of pain and of loss. Kira now knew what she had to do. It was the most dangerous gamble of all. Not to shield the valley from Kaelin's power, but to open the one part of it Kaelin never expected to see. Her own heart. "You want to unmake me, Inquisitor?" Kira's voice was now just her own, quiet and clear in Kaelin's mind. "Then you must know what I am. Look at me, all of me." And she dropped her final shield. She opened her own mind, her own memories, her own soul, and offered them, raw and undefended, to the Inquisitor's killing gaze. The influx was not an attack, it was a flood. Kaelin had prepared for a psychic assault, a wave of force she could negate and dissect. She was not prepared for a quiet, total immersion in a life. It began not with pain, but with sensation. The cool, napalic scent of the hush. The feeling of damp pine needles under worn leather boots. The reflected light of 2 moons in eyes the color of a winter sky. These were not mere images. They were fully realized experiences, memories delivered with the fidelity of the present moment. They poured into the clean, quiet code of her mind like a river of mud into a sterile operating theater. She felt the thrum of grief from a granite-carved farmer, the rough, warm flank of a dying cow, the gentle, resonant hum of healing. She experienced the terror of the gray blight, the cold intrusion of the Aegis wardens, the strange camaraderie with a scientist who saw the world in numbers. Each memory was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry of a life so profoundly connected to its world that Kaelin's own isolated existence felt for the first time like a barren moon. Irrelevant biological data, she tried to project, but her thought was a whisper in a hurricane. Her own mental barriers, designed to repel psychic attacks, were useless against an offering. There was nothing to repel. The door was simply open.
Then came the core of it, the moment of unification. Kira's terror, her pain as she held the opposing forces of moon and machine within her mortal frame. And then the transcendent, agonizing, glorious moment when the 2 songs became one harmony. Kaelin felt the birth of the accord, the rush of connection, the profound peace of a million disparate parts becoming a single, beautiful whole. It was the very antithesis of everything she believed. It was the corruption she had come to purge, and it felt like grace. Her own power, her connection to the cold, orderly void, recoiled. Her certainty was the rock upon which her reality was built, and that rock was being eroded by a tide of empathy. Then Kira showed her the final memory, the one she had glimpsed in the Inquisitor's mind. The mental landscape shifted. They were no longer in Rockton. The twin moons were gone, replaced by a single green-gold sun in a sky of soft violet. They stood in a field not of crystalline trees, but of great feathery ferns that pulsed with their own gentle bioluminescent light. The air was thick with the scent of unknown blossoms and damp alien soil. And running through this field was a young girl with stark white hair and eyes of pale, innocent blue. She was not wearing armor. She was wearing a simple tunic woven from plant fibers. She was laughing, her hands brushing against the glowing fronds, and at her heels bounded a creature that was part fox, part plant, its tail a cascade of blooming flowers. Kaelin screamed in the confines of her own mind. This was not Kira's memory. This was her own.
Viridia, home. The girl, the young Kaelin, was not a warrior. She was a shaper. She could sing to the plants, coaxing them to grow into shelters, to bloom out of season, to weave their roots into bridges. Her power was not of negation, but of cultivation. It was a chaotic, beautiful, living magic. It was, by the Directorate's definition, an impurity. The memory soured. The sky filled with the brutal, angular shapes of Aegis ships. The designation came down: Xenoclass, verdant, unstable biosphere, metaphysical contagion. The purifiers arrived. She was forced to watch as her world was unmade, not with the quick, clean fire of orbital bombardment, but with a slow, creeping negation that looked horrifyingly familiar. She saw the feathery ferns turn to gray dust. She saw her playmate, the flower-tailed fox, dissolve into motes of nothingness. She saw the faces of her parents, their songs of growth turning to cries of despair, as a figure in black armor, an Inquisitor just like her, pointed a finger and erased them from the world. She, the young girl, had only survived because her power, in its grief and terror, had created a null space around her, a bubble of pure negation that had baffled the purifiers. They had seen not a shaper of life, but a prodigy of the void. They had taken her, not as a prisoner, but as a prize. They had honed her grief into a weapon. They had taught her that the only way to never feel that loss again was to be the one holding the scalpel, to embrace the purity of the void, to become the very thing that had destroyed her. The perfect, logical order of the Aegis was a lie. It was the shield she had built around a wound that had never healed. In the physical world, the effect was catastrophic. The Inquisitor's unwavering certainty shattered, and so did her control. The immense power she wielded, the harnessed energy of entropy, broke its leash. The blue light in her eyes sputtered, flickering between the cold fire of the Inquisitor and the pale, terrified blue of the child. The negation field around her became a shrieking, uncontrolled storm. The ground beneath her feet didn't just turn to dust, it warped, folding in on itself, then exploding into shards of rock that hung in the air before being unmade. The void blade materialized in her hand, no longer a clean line, but a jagged, unstable tear in reality. She screamed, and this time the sound was audible, a raw human cry of a soul breaking apart. It was beautiful! The analyst, seeing his Inquisitor's collapse, took a hesitant step back. "Inquisitor, stabilize! You are losing containment of the null field." But Kaelin couldn't hear him. She was lost, drowning in the memory Kira had forced her to face. The unified field of the Accord wavered under the assault of this chaotic, uncontrolled unmaking. Kira, now separate from the Gestalt and standing on the riverbank, felt the raw, undirected agony of Kaelin's power washing over the valley. It was a dying star, and it would take the whole system with it. Anya and the others, now free of their trap and the mental battle, could only watch in terror as the world around Kaelin began to fray. Kira knew what she had to do. The battle was over. This was something else. She walked forward, stepping into the edge of the chaotic null field.
The worn leather of her boots began to fray, the threads unmaking, but she didn't stop. The song of the valley, the harmony of the Accord, rose up around her, not as a weapon, but as a shield, a buffer against the worst of the entropic storm. She reached the weeping, screaming Inquisitor. The woman was on her knees now, clutching her head, the black armor flickering as if it too might be erased. Kira knelt in front of her. She reached out, her hand steady, and gently took Kaelin's gauntleted one. She did not try to heal her or absorb her into the Accord. She simply made contact. A single, individual soul offering a moment of connection to another. "I know," Kira said, her voice soft but clear over the psychic storm. "I saw it. It was beautiful, and it is not gone. It lives in you." At her touch and her words, Kaelin looked up. Through the flickering light in her eyes, she saw not the anomaly, not the virus, but a woman with a kind face, offering not judgment, but witness. For a moment, the screaming void held its breath. It was in that moment of hesitation that the unassailable doctrine acted. Its programming was clear. An Inquisitor's authority was absolute, but the ship's protocols were designed for contingencies. It had monitored its master's vital signs, her energy output, her psychic state. What it registered now was a catastrophic systems failure. Its Inquisitor was compromised, her power out of control. The mission objective, the purging of the anomaly, had failed. Protocol 2, the final protocol of a purifier vessel, was invoked automatically. Sanitize the contamination at its source. Sacrifice the agent if necessary. Purity above all. A new sound filled the sky, a high-pitched, rising whine that eclipsed all else. From the belly of the obsidian flagship, a weapon deployed. It was not a lance of energy like the Helios. It was an array of 7 massive conduits that began to draw in the very light of the sky, creating a growing sphere of absolute blackness beneath the ship. The analyst's head snapped up, his suit's sensors blaring. No, they've initiated a singularity charge. They're going to collapse the entire valley into a micro-black hole. Inquisitor, we have to get out. But the Inquisitor was broken, and the transport beam was gone. The ship had abandoned them to their fate. Anya stared at the growing sphere of darkness in the sky, her scientific mind grasping the totality of their doom.
"There's no defense against that," she whispered, her face ashen. "It's not a weapon, it's a full stop. It will erase everything, the valley, the mountain, all of it." Kira looked up at the impending, silent apocalypse. Then she looked down at the shattered woman holding her hand. She had won the battle for the soul of the valley. Now she had seconds to save its body from a soulless machine. Her mind, still connected to the terrified chorus of the Accord and the logical panic of the custodian, became a crucible of impossible choices. There was no song to sing against the gravity of a dying star. There was no wall of life that could stand against the absolute end of space and time. Her power was a language, and the singularity was a period at the end of all sentences. But in her hand was the source of another language, Kaelin's power, the uncontrolled, screaming chaos of negation. It was a poison, a weapon of erasure. But what if one erasure could be used to cancel another? "Custodian," Kira projected, her thought a focused beam amidst the valley's rising panic. "The ship is collapsing space. Can you fold it?" The AI's reply was instantaneous, a cascade of flawless, terrifying mathematics. "Theoretically, a localized, non-Euclidean spatial translocation, but the energy required is astronomical. My core cannot generate it in this time frame." "I can get you the energy," Kira sent back. Her gaze fell on Kaelin. The Inquisitor was still lost, her eyes seeing a burning, verdant past. Kira tightened her grip, her own warmth and life a stark contrast to the cold nothingness radiating from Kaelin's armor. She pushed, not a command, but an image, a feeling, into the Inquisitor's shattered mind. She showed her the crystalline deer drinking from the glowing river. She showed her Anya's fierce, protective loyalty. She showed her the valley, not as a corruption, but as a place of chaotic, vibrant life. A place like Viridia. "Kaelin," Kira spoke aloud, her voice cutting through the rising whine from the sky. "Look, not at what you lost, at what we are about to lose now. Your power was born of grief for a world like this. Don't let its echo be the cause of this world's end. Help me, let your sorrow be a shield, one last time." Through the madness, a glimmer of lucidity returned to Kaelin's eyes. She saw Kira kneeling before her. She saw the fear and determination on Anya's face.
She looked up and saw the growing sphere of blackness that was the final, sterile answer to everything she had ever fought for, the ultimate purity, the ultimate grave, and she saw that it was hollow. Her training warred with her grief. Her indoctrination fought against her soul. In the end, the memory of a flower-tailed fox won. "The song," Kaelin whispered, her voice broken. "It was so loud." "Then let's give them a final note," Kira answered, a fierce, desperate hope igniting in her chest. Kaelin nodded, a single sharp gesture of decision. She met Kira's gaze, and for the first time there was no hatred, no disgust. There was only a terrible shared purpose. She gripped Kira's hand in return, and consciously, willingly, let go of the last vestiges of her control. She did not give Kira her power. She aimed it. Following Kira's guiding will, Kaelin turned her face to the heavens and screamed, a cathartic, final release of all her pain, all her loss, all her rage. The chaotic storm of negation erupting from her coalesced into a single, focused beam of pure, weaponized entropy that shot skyward. It did not strike the singularity. It struck the space between. The analyst's suit screamed with 1,000 alarms. "She's creating a dimensional schism, tearing a hole in the brain. It's not possible." The beam of nothingness ripped a wound in the sky. It was not black or white, but a color the human eye was not meant to see. A shimmering vertical tear in the fabric of the world. It was a doorway into the silence between realities. "Now!" Kira roared in the mind of the custodian. The machine acted, pouring every erg of its own energy into the process. It seized control of the schism Kaelin had created. The crystalline trees of the entire valley pulsed as one, their light flaring to blinding intensity. The mountain itself groaned as the machine within used its entire mass as an anchor and a tuning fork. The custodian didn't create a fold. It guided the entire valley, the pocket of reality containing the mountain, the forest, and the town, into the waiting wound in space. For Anya and the others on the ground, the world dissolved into a silent, timeless moment of white light. There was no sensation of movement, only of transition. And then, just as quickly, it was over. The valley was back. The sky was the same. The twin moons still hung in their accustomed places. But the unassailable doctrine was gone. The rising wine was gone. The growing sphere of the singularity was gone. Anya looked at her datapad. The chronometer had advanced by only 3/10 of a second. They had sidestepped apocalypse. Kira fell to her knees, the conduit severed, the backlash of power leaving her shaking and utterly drained. She looked at the spot where Kaelin had been. The Inquisitor was gone. Her black armor lay in a heap on the ground, empty and cold, already beginning to flake into dust. The unmaking had consumed her utterly. But where her hand had last rested on the crystalline earth, a single, impossible thing was happening. A small green sprout was pushing its way up through the glowing soil. It unfurled 2 leaves of a vibrant, feathery texture, glowing with a soft inner light that was not of the accord, but of something else, something alien, something new. A memory of a world where a girl could sing to the flowers. Silence descended, deep and profound. The analyst stood frozen, a statue of disbelief, his sensors recording the impossible. The people of Rockton slowly began to emerge, looking at the sky, feeling the absence of the dread that had crushed them moments before. Anya rushed to Kira's side, helping her to her feet.
Are you— I'm all right, Kira breathed, her eyes fixed on the small green sprout. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. It wasn't for an enemy, but for the lost child who had, at the very end, remembered how to grow things. The peace that followed was of a different kind. It was not the serene harmony that had settled after the Genesis. It was the quiet, watchful peace that follows a war. The unassailable doctrine, its censors reporting a successful sterilization of a now empty crater, warped out of the system, carrying a lie back to Aegis High Command. Rockton was officially gone, a problem erased from the star charts. They were safe, for now, hidden behind a cosmic clerical error. The analyst, a man named Corwin, became the Valley's first and only refugee. With his Inquisitor gone, and his ship convinced of his demise, he had no one to report to. Faced with the truth of what he had witnessed, he chose the impossible reality over the sterile lies he had once served. He offered his knowledge to Anya, becoming a reluctant but invaluable member of her research team. The Valley carried the scars. A deep, unsettling silence where Kaelin had made her stand. A lingering psychic echo of her pain. But there was also the sprout.
It grew with unnatural speed, tended by the custodian and watched over by Kira, into a small tree with feathery, bioluminescent leaves, a single living gravestone from another world. Weeks later, Kira stood on the same ridge as before, looking over her strange, twice-saved home. The accord was stronger than ever, its harmony now laced with a steely thread of resilience and a sorrowful understanding of sacrifice. Valerius, through channels Anya had secretly re-established, had sent a single coded message. They think you are a ghost. Stay one. The Directorate is breaking. The song is not the only thing that changes. A new age of uncertainty had begun. They were a secret, a myth, a pocket of impossible life in a universe governed by powers that wanted them sanitized or exploited. But they were alive. They were together. The twin moons began their descent, and the hush fell. Kira breathed in the cool air, which now carried a faint, alien scent of unknown blossoms. The universe was full of other songs, other worlds, other griefs. Her work was not just to be the keeper of her own valley's harmony, but perhaps, one day, to be an envoy for it. The prophecy had called her a hinge. She now understood. A hinge does not just turn once. It is a connection that allows a door to swing open again and again. And out in the vast, silent dark, other doors were waiting. The plea was not a command, but a shared memory. The image of the crystalline deer, the feeling of fierce loyalty from a soldier scientist, the impossible beauty of a world born from two warring songs. Kira poured it all into the collapsing mind of the Inquisitor. It was a truth offered against a lifetime of lies. For a heartbeat that stretched into an eternity, the psychic storm of Kaelin's grief raged. Then, through the chaos, a whisper of lucidity returned to her pale blue eyes. She saw the growing sphere of absolute blackness in the sky, the ultimate sterile purity she had been forged to serve. And she saw in its perfect void the hollow, empty face of her own sorrow. She looked at Kira, at the hand holding hers, a connection she had not felt since the flower-tailed fox had nuzzled her palm a lifetime ago. A single broken nod. The decision was made. Help me aim. Kaelin's thought was a jagged shard of glass in the psychic storm, but it was clear. Kira became her anchor. She did not try to soften or contain the Inquisitor's power. She gave it focus. She drew on the perfect, crystalline logic of the custodian, creating a targeting solution not for a weapon, but for a force of nature. She drew on the unified will of the Accord, 1,000 minds bracing for an impact that would either save them or shatter them into oblivion. Kaelin turned her face to the sky, to the lie that had stolen her life, and she let go.
It was not a scream of rage, but a final, cathartic exhalation of grief. The uncontrolled storm of negation erupting from her became a single, solid beam of pure, weaponized absence. It did not glow. It was a column of anti-light, a physical hole in the world that shot skyward with impossible speed. It did not strike the singularity weapon. It struck the very fabric of space-time itself, just beside it. The sky tore open. It was not a rip, but a silent, seamless parting, revealing a doorway into the silent, starless void between realities. Now, Kira's will and the custodian's logic became a single, unified command that echoed through every glowing leaf and stone in the valley. The machine deep within the mountain became the heart of a cosmic event. It seized the tear in space, using the raw, entropic energy of Kalen's final act as both key and fuel. The entire valley flared with a light so white it had no color. The mountain, the town, the crystalline forest, every living being within the accord, all were lifted from the bedrock of their world, not through space, but out of it. There was a single, silent, breathless moment of transition, a feeling of being a thought in a mind greater than their own. Then, with the softest of arrivals, they were back. The air settled. The light dimmed to its normal pearlescent glow. In the sky, the twin moons, Selene and Phos, hung in their familiar places. The unassailable doctrine and its devouring singularity were gone, as if they had never been. The cost was absolute. Kira knelt, the psychic backlash leaving her trembling, the ghost of Kalen's grief an icy echo in her soul. She looked at the spot where the Inquisitor had been. The black armor lay in a heap, its metallic sheen fading, flaking away into a fine, sterile dust that the gentle wind carried away. Kalen was gone, consumed utterly by the final, selfless gift of her own undoing. But where her hand had rested upon the crystalline earth, a miracle was unfolding. A single green sprout, vibrant and alive, was pushing its way through the glowing soil. It unfurled 2 feathery leaves that pulsed with a soft green-gold light, a light not of the moons or the machine, but of a forgotten violet star.